We live? Excellent. Let's get rolling. Welcome everyone to the Lincolnville Selectmen's meeting. It is May 28th. Kern, would you care to read the quote of the evening?
I'd be glad to. The key to being a good manager is keeping the people who hate me away from those who are still undecided. Casey Stengel.
Thank you very much. And at this point, I would like to open the podium for any non-agenda items. Seeing nobody rushing up to the podium, let's move along to the administrator's report.
Just for everybody's knowledge, absentee ballots are now available for voting that will be conducted on Tuesday, June 11th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the Lincolnville Central School. Besides the candidate ballots, we'll have a 5-town CSD ballot, or the high school, concurring with the budget meeting that was held last Tuesday, and a question on the Lincolnville Central School budget for the budget that was determined last Wednesday. The electrical engineer, Patrick Ouellette, was here last week and went over the fire station issue with me. I say with me, I was there while he took all sorts of measurements and figured out what was there for equipment. I would anticipate at some point relatively soon we'll have something back from him. And a week ago Friday, Selectman Gerritsen, Selectman Dunn, and I attended the resiliency kickoff meeting regarding the pier and the study that the state is having done. I would say it was enlightening. They talked a little bit about what they foresee for potential for future in terms of sea level rise or change, and kind of introduced the discussion to all of us. Promised us a slideshow, but we never got it, so you don't have it to look at, but maybe
We're hoping it will be forthcoming. They've communicated a long list of needs that they have.
yeah, they what they'll do is basically they start off with they're doing some background work now, but they're collecting data on what actually exists there. Of course, each of the 10 locations has different information that's available. We're fortunate we have construction drawings that may not be precise, but are probably a lot better off than some of the facilities they're looking at. So stay tuned. I don't know if Selectman Gerritsen or Selectman Dunn have more they want to contribute on that meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely look forward to sharing the information that we saw at the presentation. There were some really interesting slides, links, tools that we can use for future planning purposes. So hopefully they'll be forthcoming with that presentation.
I guess I'll just add, it was sobering to see how high the sea level is estimated to rise in the next 50 years, and seeing what that means for our pier in the worst case scenario and the best case scenario. I think it was 7 feet above high tide, so it's I think 14 feet, something like that.
That was the best case scenario?
I think that was the worst case scenario. Yeah. So.
And then it rises exponentially in the next 30 years beyond that mark. But anyway, not to get off topic. David, continue.
I think that's all I have besides what's on the agenda.
Okay. Any questions for David beyond that? Okay, let's move along to upcoming meetings and announcements.
All meetings are here at the town office unless announced otherwise. Planning board meets Wednesday, May 29th, 7 p.m. School committee meets Monday, June 3rd, 6 p.m. in room C1 at the Lincolnville Central School. Conservation Commission is scheduled to meet Monday, June 10th, 4 p.m. And the Board of Selectmen currently, although we're going to talk about it a little later on the agenda, is scheduled to meet next on Monday, June 10th, 6 p.m.
Okay. Are there any upcoming community events anyone would care to share? Seeing nothing, let's move along to the meeting minutes from May 13th.
I move that the board approve the May 13th, 2019 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Just two notes, little very minor typos. Line 213 says forwards. That should just say forward. And on page 10, line 381, instead of preserving, it should be persevering. That's it.
Care to amend the motion?
I will amend my motion as changed.
I will amend my second.
Fantastic. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? And we have meeting minutes from the 16th of May.
I move that the board approve the May 16th, 2019 meeting minutes as presented.
No second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And we have the fire chief here, so we can chat about fire truck bid award recommendation. Come on down.
Don Fullington, Lincolnville Fire Chief,
Nate Woodson, First Assistant Fire Chief.
and we're here on behalf of the truck committee to make a recommendation on which apparatus we feel the town should purchase. We feel the E1 apparatus is the right vehicle for what we need to try to accomplish. I don't know, do you have any questions that could be answered?
Just for the benefit of anybody that might be here or might be watching at home, the truck committee, the fire department, put together some specifications, which I added a little boilerplate to. Out they went. We received 3 proposals back, which the board has at least the basics of the. We didn't bother to copy the notebooks that some of them sent with all the backup data. Handed that off to the chief and the truck committee for their review and recommendation, which you have before you, and I would concur with their recommendation since the specifications were well done. That E1's the first truck that met all their specifications, and then we had a couple of different options in terms of pricing, whether it be prepay or pay after it's delivered. The recommendation from the truck committee and the informal poll of the finance advisory committee was to prepay because you get a discount. We also get a performance bond from the selected contractor so that if they went belly up, we could go back to a bonding company and get our money back. So
Is it a situation where if you don't prepay, it's either way it's paid, you pay in full upon delivery. It's not a loan. Oh, okay.
Correct.
All right. Then
Yep.
then we're my question was it's irrelevant now. Doesn't matter.
okay.
My
I say get the discount then.
Yeah, my question is, you indicated that there might be a few additional costs once we receive the truck. I'm just, 2-part question. One is, are those things that we can budget for in a year in a like separate line? And I'm just kind of curious ballpark what we're talking about.
We have talked to the rep from E1, and we did actually change the specs that we received from the initial bid. We actually removed quite a few costly items that we felt we didn't need, but we did upgrade a couple small things as far as tires. Some of the interior paneling is perforated instead of solid stainless steel sheets. Makes it easier for us to set the truck up when we receive it to mount things.
I think if anything, the net cost is probably going to go down. I don't know if she's referring to equipment, loose equipment.
Yeah.
equipment. I think we were talking, it was 435,000, and David indicated that if the equipment wise was gonna be 40 to 60 grand, and we have, I believe, $530,000 total in the truck fund, and we can use some of that money to pay for the equipment, is what I understood.
Yeah, what we've done in the past, of course, the past doesn't necessarily mean what we're gonna do in the future, but what we've done in the past is buy equipment from the truck fund that goes on the truck, but we buy it separately rather than asking a truck vendor to buy it, because then they go out and buy it, they mark it up 15%, sell it to us.
Yeah.
We're frugal, we like to buy the right stuff and put it on the truck.
Well, that and there's some other towns that have tried to do that recently and waited for months for their equipment, and it never showed up.
Let's not do that.
We don't
Yeah.
want to do that.
So once we take delivery of the truck, is it then that you order the equipment that you want from the truck? And if so, is the truck gonna be put right into service? And then you put the equipment in it, or do we have to wait until the equipment comes before it goes into service?
The plan would be to buy all the equipment that we know we have to have, as far as air packs and tools and hoses and ladders and all that. Well, ladders will come with the truck, but all that stuff will be purchased prior to the truck arriving. That way it shortens the time that the truck is just sitting here, not in service. But I'm sure there will be some things that we need to purchase after it shows up to make sure it all fits correctly and it works properly.
Any other questions? Does anyone care to make a motion?
I move the board award the contract for a new fire truck to Greenwood Emergency Vehicles in the amount of $435,449, and the town administrator be authorized to sign the contract on behalf of the town.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have a variety of representatives from the energy team here to give us a presentation.
Hello everyone, I'm John Williams. I'm speaking for the energy team tonight. I think we're a group of 9 or 10, and most of us are here tonight. We meet informally when we have something to talk about, and recently we've been meeting quite often to consider the pros and cons of installing solar panels at the school. All right, so I've got some prepared remarks, and I'll just read them. Do you have you have printouts? Okay. So the energy team originated with a solar energy project at Lincolnville Community Library. We have since been involved in motivating a project at the firehouse to supply electricity to town buildings and to upgrade town-owned sidewalk lights at the beach. We wanted to meet with you today for an update on our current activities. The E-Team has been investigating the possibility for solar panels at Lincolnville Central School to supply 100% of LCS electricity. The project would be about 5 times the size of the municipal array at the firehouse. We're considering both town-owned and privately owned properties to site the array. We have considered the financial implications of either installing panels locally with a direct connection to LCS or sited remotely with connection to LCS via the grid. The finances of using storage batteries to mitigate CMP demand charges have been examined, and we have modeled how site prep costs would affect short-term expenses and long-term savings using custom computer code written just for this project. Example results are given in the attached pictures. I have 2 more slides, where cumulative LCS electricity expenses are compared in scenarios with and without solar panels. Substantial savings can be realized to save the town money. The project is now at a stage where better estimates are needed for land procurement and preparation and for eventual buyout under a PPA. like we have for the firehouse. In the near future, we will conduct informal discussions with local site prep contractors and solar installers. This information will allow us to narrow the range of financial possibility and present the board with a more detailed and accurate analysis. Okay, so where are we going to put it? Ideally, we would go within 1,000 feet of the school building so we can connect to the service panel of the school. And that would be ideal. Also, we could go remote and put the electricity into the grid, which would then travel through the grid to the school. All right. John Luft of Revision Energy, we met in this room informally with him. He's a resident of Lincolnville. And he said he would have to be within 1,000 feet of three-phase power. So most of the power around here is just two-phase. But he needs three-phase. You can get more energy in the wires with less current if you have three-phase. And so he said this array would be large enough. He needs to be near three-phase. The only three-phase power I'm aware of was, I heard it was put in just for the school, and it comes from the Atlantic Highway up Duck Trap Road, Beach Road, and over to the school. So these little pins here mark town-owned properties that we thought might be candidates for site location, and but they're probably not near three-phase power. The reason, I mean, we know this red line, we know that three-phase. If there were three-phase, say up here or here or here or here, then CMP probably would have brought it right in from a closer, right? So the odds are that this may be it. So here's a result of some modeling. Like I said, we don't have complete information, so we don't know what the site prep is going to cost, the earthwork, and if there's trees that have to be cleared, we don't know. So we try lots of different values. We don't know what the buyout cost would be eventually under the PPA, so we try lots of values. And there's other parameters, and we try lots of values, and so we get all kinds of combinations and all kinds of answers, and that's why we need to pin down some of these things so we can have a better idea of what's going on. But what this is showing here is a span of 40 years on the x-axis, and on the y-axis is the total money accumulative spent, okay, over that period of time. So if you just have business as usual, so that's 100% CMP without solar, then there's the red line. And this is because of inflation. We modeled 2.5% inflation. Well, that's not too out of line with regular old monetary inflation. And then CMP jacks their rates. I think there was a 14% hike January this year, maybe it was, and then 17% a year or two before that. They compensate for those with those raises with drops in other parts of the building. But anyway, this is just would be monetary inflation. Once you have a PV system in place, there is no inflation, right? The sun keeps shining. It doesn't charge you more for shining. And so you can flatten out your curves. And that's why we're getting more and more savings as we go forward. So in this particular scenario, this would be a 15-year loans, a loan taken for the site prep, and then 6 years later, a loan taken for the buyout. And so 15 years we modeled. We would break even in 11.7 years. You can see the blue line with PV is just slightly higher than the red line. So you'd have to pay a little bit more at first, but after 6 years in this scenario, which again, we don't know what, there's too many moving parts, there would be a little expense, and then you'd break even, and then PV is cheaper going out. So after 40 years here, we've got $948,000 in savings over CMP. That's $948,000, the difference right there. Well, today I just divided that by 40 and I got $24,000. So on average, that's a $24,000 savings every year for 40 years, right? The savings don't materialize till a little bit later, but it's hardly any more expensive early on here. So I guess that's any other points that I might have forgot. Anybody?
You've got another slide too.
No,
Okay.
I think I'm done. Yes. So any questions?
Do you have any sites in mind as optimum sites?
Well, I guess we have one in mind, at least one, and it's right out the window.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
A lot of trees out there right now.
Oh,
but-
no.
How large it needs to be.
Oh, yes. Okay, so to supply 100% of LCS electricity, we need 700, roughly 700, that's ominous. Yes, goodbye.
There we go.
700 panels, that'll take a 1 acre. And then we need clearance so we don't get shade, and so that might be 2 acres. So this part out here, depending, we kind of walked out there, picked up a few ticks and looked at the land, and we think it's upland and not wetland, but we have to look at all that some more. But we marked out like 1.8 acres. From where we walked, go to Google Earth, draw a little box, 1.8 acres. And some of that goes over to the sand and salt, toward the sand and salt building, and that's clearance over there, right? It's a big lot and the trees are down, so that would be a way to avoid some shade. So we're just not sure exactly where we might put the array on the 1.8 acres.
Am I completely missing something by asking if it can go on the roof of the school?
No, you're not missing anything. It's a very small roof. For one thing, we need an acre.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and John Luft also, he's not thrilled about the roof. He doesn't think it's structurally strong enough. He doesn't want to punch holes in the roof and get blamed when it leaks and the gym and all that.
I
He's
see that.
discouraging. We looked at, what about putting canopies up over the parking lot? And John Luft again, he said, that's gonna be real expensive and you don't wanna do that. So,
Snow falls off in the winter and
yeah, and then it comes off in the winter and then people can't park and so on and so forth.
And there's no space on the town-owned property over there that the school sits on?
The playing fields, we'd love to put solar panels on the playing fields.
Real popular.
We're not allowed.
Just, devil's
That would take
advocate.
care of the maintenance questions of the playing field.
That would solve a lot of complicated logistics.
We talked
Two birds with
about,
one stone.
we talked about the fields right across the street. Well, those have houses on them, so you'd have to buy houses. We own this already, town owns this. So, Gary.
Yeah, I'm Gary Galatian. We looked pretty carefully at the cleared school property because that would really make the most sense. You didn't have to clear any woods, you wouldn't have to even take a look at the wetland issues. But it turns out that the only real cleared land out there other than the playing fields is where the septic field is. And there's very little space. It's just next to where the soccer field is beyond that point. So that's how it works. The other possibility would be private land. If there was a field of a couple acres within 1,000 feet of the field, that's something we could also model using the model that John's put together to see what the cost would be if land had to be leased or purchased.
And on that point, there's an advantage to hooking up straight to the school because of demand charges, which solar doesn't mitigate the demand charges very well. Demand charges, CMP looks every 15 minutes at the flow of energy into the school. So not the total amount that adds up over time, that's kilowatt hours, but just at the kilowatt flow into the school. Then they average the kilowatts for every 15 minutes for a whole month. They find the peak flow. They multiply by, it turns out to be around $13, and you get to pay that for your demand charge, which amounts to a third to 40 up to 40% of your bill. So you really can't mitigate that. You might think you can with solar, the sun shining in the daytime, and that's when the school uses the most electricity. So if you go in behind the meter, you don't need to draw so much from the grid, and that's true. But then here comes a cloudy day, or snow or something, and then they get you 15 minutes. You didn't do it,
Wow.
so we're going to charge you the full amount.
Mm.
So it's better to go, it's still okay. I did a whole bunch of modeling. I got actual use data every 15 minutes for 4 years worth from Paul Russo. And I found, and I used simulated PV production from the Department of Energy. They have a website that it'll spit all that out. Anyway, I found about 16 or 17% mitigation. Okay, if we go behind the meter. So I added all, what does that do financially? And over 25 years, I think, oh boy, what was the numbers? The 40-year number I remember was $148,000 savings if you can go behind the meter, as compared to going to a remote site and hooking into the grid.
Wow.
So if we can get close, and this is close enough, you have to be within 1,000 feet, that's about 600 feet. It's worth money if you can do that.
Mm.
Whereas if you go off and you have to buy land or somebody's house, and then you're going to pay for that, and you're going to pay because you're not going to mitigate your demand charges over the years. So it becomes more expensive. But you have to look at it and write the numbers down, and then you can make your decisions.
So the peak demand charges, that only affects large consumers of electricity, is that right?
If you draw between 20 kilowatt flow and 400 kilowatts flow, then you go into medium service, whatever they call it, and you go on the demand billing schedule.
Okay.
Yes, 20 to 400.
20 to 400. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I think this is a really exciting proposal.
Yeah, I
the
think
idea
it
that we
can
could save
work.
this much money,
Yeah.
and I was hoping that we would be getting this presentation from you. So I'm glad it's finally arrived.
Yes, well, we'll have more next time we come back and we get some hard numbers on some of these things, then we can talk.
John, you might mention this, the
So-
energy efficiency issue that we're looking at.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay, yes, please.
It just, microphone please for
Okay.
those at home. So have you scheduled a meeting to talk with the school committee about their thoughts, needs, desires for,
Monday, June 3rd.
great, fantastic.
Paul Russo scheduled that. He called me and said, can you come? So,
Okay,
yep.
fantastic. And so at this point, you're looking for board support to give you access to some more numbers and to do some further investigation.
So we can talk to site prep people and then maybe to solar installers and just informally, what's the buyout cost going to be? That's the key number for us. And they have to look at this and say,
Sure.
oh, that's terrible, we can't go there, or it's great, you know.
Sure,
Okay.
sure. Does the board have more questions for the committee?
No, I think it's awesome we're pursuing this.
Does,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, and then I had a question.
no, go ahead.
Okay, in this case, who would write, if we get this far and it looks good and we need to issue RFPs, an RFP, who does that? Paul Russo or Dave? Where does that go?
Well, it would ultimately depend on a number of things. So I think that probably the board taking a next step to give you approval, and then us having a follow-up conversation, we would be able to pursue that conversation.
Okay, okay. And Bob just reminded of one more thing we've kind of loosely getting involved with. It was energy conservation. That's the cheap way to, you know, get more energy out of what you have. And so we've been talking about it, and it's like, okay, Central School, we've talked to Paul Russo, and he's done a lot of things to conserve energy. Well, how do we rank? How do we compare to the high school? How do we compare to the Hope elementary school or whatever? Well, how do we compare to a school in Bar Harbor? How about in Portland? So we thought, boy, it would be nice if we can just look up how many kilowatt hours per student or kilowatt hours per square foot in all the schools in Maine. So I contacted the Department of Education, and they said they are not mandated to collect that kind of data now, and referred me to the Governor's Energy Office. There's a new guy in there, a 36-year-old guy from Massachusetts, and he's running the office. And he seemed interested, and so we're at the point saying, well, how can we try to get this done at the state level? So we have data, and then, you know, you could picture schools, they would have rivalries and competitions. Let's try to beat these guys. Oh, we gotta turn the lights down, we gotta do this and that. Students will get involved with it. They'll try to beat their neighbors, and they can, you know, go home, and now they're gonna really be trying at school, we hope, so they can win. And then talk to their parents, that sort of thing. So just having the information could really spawn a lot of really good things in the state. So we're going to see if we can help urge that forward. So,
Yeah.
Cool concept.
Great.
Yeah,
that's
it's a
great.
good concept. So.
Would anyone care to make a motion, please?
I move that the board allow access by the energy team members and potential contractors to the various town-owned sites for the purpose of collecting data regarding land procurement and preparation, provided that for public safety and school safety, that the town office and school be notified of the dates and times of such visits.
No second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Yes, David.
I'd just like to let John and everybody else know that when we were doing both the school project and the exploration for town offices, we've got some mapping out back of wetlands. It's already been done, which we'll obviously want to avoid or plan for. Let's put it that way.
Yep. And on the wetlands, Revision Energy doesn't want wetlands because they don't want their equipment in there. So it's not just an environmental concern. It's,
Right.
You know. Okay.
Yeah, fantastic.
All right.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll keep you informed before we talk to anybody, just so you know what we're doing.
Excellent.
As we go.
Thank you.
We
Thank
really,
you.
we very
Thank you.
much appreciate it.
Yeah.
This is
very much.
such another great example of our fantastic volunteers and excellent and transparent communication in the process. I love it. And now we need to have a conversation about emergency medical services. David, would you care to give a preamble
Sure.
as such?
It's very challenging even to keep up with it on a day-to-day, full-time basis, but here goes just nonetheless. The Camden Select Board, you have in your packet, has agreed to meet with other communities regarding a long-range goals and objectives type of conversation with select boards about what they're trying to accomplish with emergency medical services. They are hesitant to send the full board, but have agreed to get together nonetheless, and we're trying next steps to try to coordinate that. The real focus in the last, beyond trying to get this agreement to participate, has been on the contract at hand in terms of the short-term provision of EMS. Selectman Garrettson shared today a letter he got from a Camden Select Board member, which had been shared with me, but as you note on top of it, said privileged attorney-client communication. So I honored that privilege and didn't share it elsewhere. They did say that it has now been shared apparently with the public. The issues raised in the letter, I think, were pretty self-evident when we all looked at the last contract draft. Met this afternoon with the town managers of Camden and Rockport. The Hope administrator was not available to attend with us. Everybody seems pretty, our partners seem pretty entrenched, that's a harsh word, but in attempting to get to a 1-year contract extension, basically back where we were in January or February with Northeast. Rick Bates is going to have a similar conversation with the Rockport Selectmen tonight about that objective, and he's presuming that his board is not objecting to that, we'll be communicating with Northeast about trying to get back to square one, at least for the short term. And then how we move forward longer term, hopefully something can come out of a joint meeting of all our boards. So I wish I had something concrete to whip out and say, yep, everything's hunky-dory, here it is, 1 year, 5 years, whatever, but that's kind of where we are. I'm happy to try. I don't know if I did a very good job explaining that. I'm happy to try if you want more.
Questions?
I do have a question.
Yep.
Do we have 2 members for the EMS Performance Review Committee?
We do.
2 select board members?
No, we have one. One select board member, one citizen member.
Okay,
Chair.
so that's 2 members.
Yep.
Have we not been attending any of the meetings?
There have not been any meetings called.
We haven't had a meeting. Well, we had one EMS Performance Review Committee meeting. Oh, let's see, we're in May now, end of May. Late March, early April-ish.
And we attended those meetings?
I was there. Sid was there.
Were our 2 representatives there?
No,
It was
that
prior to my appointment.
I'm sorry, I'd sound like an investigator here, but I
No.
take exception to the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down. I know you can't read tone without listening to somebody talk, but I take exception to it.
Yep.
Sid and I were there and both participated. I don't know if Sid participated. I mean, he was there. I participated because I expressed Lincolnville's concerns, but
Yeah, there have, since our board appointed me to that committee, there have not been any meetings called.
Okay, who's our citizen?
Sid Udy?
Who?
Sid E-U-D-Y. Udy? Udy?
Okay.
He was a,
Forgive the ignorance.
Okay,
I believe
just
he's
a
a
question.
retired doctor.
I guess I would like to also call attention to, the second paragraph. There have been requests on a couple of occasions to set up brief meeting between our respective select board chairs. This was the Camden Select Board Chair who, on a couple of occasions, sent me a direct correspondence asking to come and meet with me to discuss a number of things. And I have not responded because we are a board and I believe we discuss things, especially of this level of importance with this sort of deadline as a board. So I haven't, nor have I had the time, frankly, outside of everything else. But that aside, I would never want any of you, nor do I see it as a responsible chair behavior to speak for any of you at all. So,
Well, even if such a meeting were to occur, you wouldn't, neither chair would be authorized to do anything because the board just hadn't told them to go have that conversation.
well, furthermore, I think that the last board, Lincolnville board directive was to ask David and I to correspond with our partner towns
Right.
to engage with them to schedule a meeting. And so as far as board level decisions, that directive hasn't changed unless any one of you want to change that now and create a new motion and a new directive. But I, of my own accord, am not going to take us off in a different direction. So
Right.
I'm happy to do the board's directive,
So,
but that, I'm going to address that directly because I
Yeah, well,
am not negligent. I feel like I'm
so
behaving in a proper way.
Just thinking about what you just said, if the request came to you for a meeting, I wonder if the Camden board requested that that person reach out to you to request a meeting.
I did ask David to review the last Camden minutes.
Okay.
That wasn't necessarily obvious,
Okay.
but
There's no,
There-
there's no record of their board instructing their chair to reach out to you directly.
not that we could find,
Okay.
unless there's something that you've dug up in the meantime, David.
No, when you, as challenging as it is, and I can understand your challenge and perhaps frustration, it may be best to, each town is, although we are all run by the same laws, may be best to, hard as it is, put that behind you. Recognize that they're willing to get together with the other two communities plus us to have a conversation. If they send one, so be it. They send two, so be it. We could have 5 chairs or 6 chairs if they're gonna bring the manager, and let those that can make it show. Certainly there's been interest on all the boards' behalf in Rockport to participate, if they're all available, and the Hope Board, so.
Well, I guess, and that's my point, perhaps ill-made, is that as far as I understand, unless any of you folks here want to make a different motion, our directive hasn't changed and our communication to our partner towns haven't changed, and continues to remain that we seek to schedule as soon as possible a meeting of our partnership boards of selectmen so that we can discuss our goals and objectives regarding emergency medical services.
I have a question about the 2 representatives.
Well, I just, can, before
Oh,
you
sorry,
ask
sorry,
your
sorry, sorry.
question,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just,
yeah,
I
yeah,
would, a general nodding of heads, I think, would
Yeah.
suffice, that,
Yeah, the directive.
that
hasn't
our,
changed.
our board's directive and our request to our partner communities has not changed.
Has not changed, no,
Okay.
I wouldn't.
Great, so just, that's what I wanted to resolve with the implication for subsequent or follow-up conversations or meetings. It's moot,
Right,
because our board's position remains consistent.
that we wanna,
Yes,
Having-
so that's been rejected, unfortunately, by Camden, and so they're
To a degree, like, sort of.
rejected, well, having all 5 of us there has
They
been rejected.
have,
wait, I'm a little
they
confused now.
can, they're asserting that they do not wish to send a full board,
Right.
at least in this communication.
That they don't wish any of us to send a full board. To have a-
We're
have a
requesting
joint
you
meeting.
consider a meeting includes a maximum of 2
So,
representatives.
speaking for myself, I would prefer to have a meeting with all the full boards, and so Camden is saying they do not want to do that, and they're offering to have a meeting of, the 2 representatives from each board of the 4 towns, and so I think we should take them up on that offer, because I want to meet with them in some capacity. So clearly, our chair and one of us and our town administrator, and I think we should try to set that up.
Would it be out of line to ask the other 2 towns, boards, their preference of a full board meeting or a appointee meeting?
It's my understanding.
Are we overstepping our bounds of?
It's my understanding that the towns of Rockport and Hope have been amenable to convening a partner meeting with no restrictions on attendance. However many, I mean, obviously it's not dissimilar with this convening of this board. Obviously you're not,
I mean, the board,
required with punitive action to attend. If you don't attend a certain number of meetings, there's action, but we behave as a board and we behave as a quorum, and so my question to you, Josh, is what do you hope to accomplish by sending 2 board members to a meeting, and what could that group of individuals possibly hope to accomplish, and how can there be the guarantee and promise of conveyance of the board's wishes without an explicit action or motion on each town's behalf beforehand?
Well, I mean, it's similar to Nichols Solid Waste, right? Obviously, that is its own corporation with the
Similar
board.
to, but by far, we don't have an interlocal agreement. I mean,
Right, of
that's
course.
part of the issue here, is that while we have 4 independent contracts,
Yeah.
and yet we are beholden to each other as a group, because without the group, we do not have this offer.
Mhm.
It just seems like a very non-expedient way of getting things done. I mean, if you're going to send, like, you're going into it with 2 people, so you're automatically crippling it from being able to accomplish anything of real value, because no one can make any decisions because there's no quorums. So if Camden's only, if any one town refuses to send more than 2 people, then I kind of guess it doesn't matter. Maybe your point is like, okay, let's just do the 2 people. But it might be worth going back to Camden and just pointing that out. I mean, not that they don't already know, but maybe, I don't know what they're thinking. It just seems like if they say, hey, well, wouldn't it be more effective to send, like, at least send everybody, each board send a quorum, so that in case there's an agreement on something, they can actually vote and get something done.
But here's the thing: our board can talk about what we want in the contract, right? We send 2 representatives, the 2 representatives from each town. They have a big discussion, and then our 2 representatives come back here, and then we can make decisions here at our very next meeting. I mean, again, I would prefer that all 5 of us were there, but that offer's not on the table, and I would rather 2 of us meet with them than none of us meet with them.
Well, certainly a meeting, one way or the other,
I mean,
is better
to
than
me,
no meeting.
To my way of thinking, and I'll grant you I have a backwards way of thinking at times, but it just seems to me like the longest route to take to try to get something accomplished. Because you send 2 people to talk, they have to come back to the board has to hear whatever they have to say, make a decision. We as a board, in my opinion, can't make any decision at this group meeting other than just, we feel this way, and we have to come back here in front of our camera, in front of our people, to actually make a decision. But 5 sets of ears are a lot better than 2. And 5 sets of opinions are a lot better than 2. Does it make it more of a cluster? Probably it does. Does it make the meeting last longer? Probably it does. Are there more ideas out there that could be voiced, and better ways of maybe better results coming out of it? I think it's worth it.
But
to
it's
have
not
a larger group.
It's not an option, though. Unfortunately, the biggest partner.
That's not true. I mean,
Well, yeah, I know
I
I don't get what you're.
I feel
they're asking, but
the town of Camden can choose to govern themselves however they see fit. They are perfectly entitled to do so, and they don't need our condolence or permission for any of it.
Mhm.
However, my 1/5 of the vote on this board, I am going to state my position that I would like to see a convening of our entire board, if possible, because I value all of our voices and our opinions, especially with something as important as our emergency medical services, with the potential of a 1 and or multi-year contract and or whatever scenarios we may be faced with, and knowing that we have a very diverse board with very diverse experience bases, and the fact that our voters have entrusted us as a group to consider these things with great implications to our constituents financially and safety-wise, I will not advocate for us sending anything less than a true representation of our voter base, which would be at a minimum a quorum of the board. And any other town can send as many or as little as they wish to send. That's my position.
I agree with that. I mean, I wouldn't, I mean, I would hope that by would as well, in the interest of everything you just said, and in the interest of what Dave said in terms of being able to get things done in a more, you know, it's because it's like you just have to go there, bring it back to your own board, talk about it there, and you're gonna have to.
And then
I mean,
bring
wouldn't
it
you
back
eventually
again.
have to have a meeting with all 4 boards anyway, right? A quorum, and you'd have to have a quorum meeting with those boards anyhow, right? Eventually,
Well,
or would it just be
the
come back to your own board?
well, in reality, I mean, each town contracts individually with Northeast.
Right.
Right.
But Northeast, and I don't want to speak for them, but they view us as a collective, for
Right.
lack of a better word, because the system and the finances don't work if one party drops out. Because, you know, they're figuring, and I'm just using round numbers here, that the 4-town subsidy is $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
And if one town drops out, the subsidy might still need to be $300,000.
So the other 3 have to pick up that slack.
Well, yeah, except I don't really know if the 300 remains.
Right.
If the town of, if one of the larger communities dropped out, the cost might, if we wanted the same level of service, the cost might actually have to go up because they can't bill the patients because there aren't that many patients, you know, so it's,
Well, but
it's
David-
all these moving parts that together Northeast is viewing us as an entity, even though they're contracting with us separately. That makes
Yes, however, so I feel like the conversation is being muddled, particularly with this last correspondence from the chair of the Camden Select Board, that our last request was to convene a meeting of the partner towns specifically with regards to our goals and objectives regarding emergency medical services, not to discuss necessarily our current contractor provider. There is a bigger issue, a bigger conversation that it breaks down into 2 parts. What are our goals as individual communities, and do we have goals going forward as partner towns? And if those 2 questions then can be answered, then we can have any number of conversations about our current and or any future providers. If the question is to discuss service with our current providers, there is any number of elements within our current contract, which we have days left on, to pursue any sort of follow-up action if we're unhappy with the services. And also, if I'm not mistaken, that is what our EMS Performance Review Committee is for, theoretically, even though the charge for that committee hasn't changed in quite some time. So if the conversation is to discuss our current contract or performance of our current contractor, that's one conversation. We have requested a conversation looking at the fact that at the end of June, as of midnight, we do not have any service providers. We don't have a contract signed that will guarantee us emergency medical services. That's the conversation.
And we do have to be able to separate the 2. There's the short term, the provision of the service currently provided by Northeast, and that's the only proposal we have on the table right now for
Right.
the short-term future, and then we have the longer range overarching policy, which is, I think, where this board had been headed in terms of the discussion with our neighboring communities, as do our goals and objectives for the long-range provision of that service still align. Because similarly to what we had done 6 years ago, when we were faced with the challenges of the previous provider. And as challenging as it is, we've got to separate the two, because they are they're linked, but they're not forever linked.
They're not the same conversation always, though.
We've got to get through, we do need to have a short-term contract. The existing contractor, even if we don't have a contract, can't just walk away without certain notifications to us, which they haven't provided. And I don't think they have any intention of providing or just walking away. However, when you don't have a contract, you don't have a contract. And notices can come, and then you will be without a provider. But I don't think we're there. I think if somebody were to ask me after today's conversations and this letter from Camden, I would work diligently to arrange for a meeting with the boards of the 4 towns, with the understanding that if town A didn't want to send or couldn't send because of whatever work commitments or other life commitments, didn't want to send 5, so be it. At least you get as many people there that are interested in the provision of this for their communities, and you can't force somebody to have a conversation.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I would like to throw out to our board for consideration in offering to our partner towns, perhaps hiring a facilitator for this meeting, so that it doesn't feel like one town positioning itself. In order to put ourselves more on neutral ground, so that we as individual partner towns can come to this meeting in a very structured and timed and organized way, voice our positions, and then be able to move on from that conversation, so that it isn't, say, any one board chair or administrator or manager who is tasked with looking biased in any one particular way. So
Which actually goes to like what this letter seems to be expressing a little, which is like, we kind of don't want things to get muddied up with too many cooks in the kitchen. So if one town brings 5 people and another town only wants to bring 2, that doesn't matter, or it might actually help if Camden might say, oh well, geez, if there's going to be a mediator that's going to keep it on track and everything, maybe we will bring on 5. You know what I mean? It addresses that pretty effectively.
I just think that it could be advantageous to all of us to have it be the most efficient way of communicating with each other.
I think it's a great idea. Is there a motion for that?
I don't know, Josh, you look like you have thoughts.
I have some thoughts. So the last time the 4 towns needed to talk about EMS service, that was, remind me, 5 years ago? 6 years
and a
ago. And I'm assuming at those meetings it was full boards. Is that how it
Yeah, I
happened?
think the initial meeting was as many of the board members that could made it, and it was pretty close to a full board.
It was full, yeah.
From all
Well,
towns.
I mean, there was many people attending.
Yes,
I want to say
and
that.
at that point, after everybody heard the picture as it was presented, the towns actually pretty much individually charged the managers and administrators to work collectively to prepare a request for proposals, and out the door it went. I don't know if we did it at that meeting or if it came back to the boards, but.
My recollection is that there,
And then a joint, I don't remember what the title of it was, but it was a joint board was created, which was, at that point, I think went down to 2 people from each community that served on, the boards agreed to put this request out together. We did. And then it was a subset of the boards with each town. I believe we appointed 2. Appointing 2 to review the proposals, interview the prospective proposers, and then ultimately we ended up having a presentation at the Opera House in Camden, where we got to sit up on stage. I can remember doing this now, and we made a recommendation, that group, to the communities as a whole, but certainly to the select boards of the 4 towns as a group.
with representatives of the contractors being considered.
Yeah, I mean, it was a public meeting. Anybody that wanted to come was certainly welcome, but certainly the select boards were there. But that's kind of how it started off. All boards met together, heard it, decided collectively to get a more manageable group, and then the manageable group went to work.
And then presented their findings.
And then went back to all the boards and presented their findings,
Right.
collectively.
I just don't like the idea of a facilitator. I totally understand the idea that strong opinions could dominate the session, but maybe it's more of a philosophical thing that I feel like our 4 towns should be able to come together and just have a conversation without a facilitator.
It does put this, I mean, let's just call it for what it is. Which select board chair? I mean, theoretically, if we're calling the meeting, I would have to run the meeting. But if another town, say, takes issue with this, it could take the pressure off of them in that issue that they may have and level the playing field.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the reality, is that one town, one chair would have to be the point person. And I just think it's only fair to level, make it more neutral, but again, it's just a suggestion.
Because we've had joint board meetings. I mean, I'm talking the last 20 years. I would imagine our 4 boards have met on a variety of issues and have been able to run the meetings jointly.
Well, we invited Camden here when they were the then select board, when they were starting conversations with the DOT.
That's right.
And
One.
we had
A big presentation.
we had a joint meeting with them and our Route 1 advisory committee.
I don't know.
We've had joint meetings with other towns. It's not unheard of to get
We haven't.
boards together.
Yeah, and certainly Camden and Rockport get together periodically because they now share some services, so
Yep.
they've had discussions. I don't know as we've had, I'm trying to think back, I don't think we've done besides EMS, I don't think we've done a 4.
For board, no, I think
We
EMS
had
is.
to at some time for Midcoast Solid Waste, but that would predate all of us.
Mhm. That,
I mean, it would have to.
That must have
but
been
now
back when
You're looking back probably.
When they did the pay-as-you-throw.
Right,
when
right,
they-
Yeah.
Yeah,
when
that
we
was,
first set out everything, but that's gonna be back in the late 70s, early 80s.
yeah.
But there would've had to been at that time. I mean, you couldn't put it together without it, I don't think.
yeah, I don't know.
I guess getting back to my point, it appears that we're at another significant crossroads, where my feeling is that I value our board and our diverse opinions on the board, and that I would want all of us to represent Lincolnville. So, I think it's perfectly fine, whatever any other town wishes to do. But those are my thoughts.
And I'll just make it clear that I would prefer that we have a meeting with all the full boards, but what I think is more important is that we're meeting as sooner than later. However that's possible, and with whatever makeup from each board. I just want us to meet somehow. And if we can do it with our full board and portions of the other boards, that's fine too. I just want to make sure we can come to some agreement with the towns.
Kern?
I don't know what the big deal is with not wanting to bring on your board. I'm sorry, I tell it like it is. Sometimes it's brutal and sometimes it shouldn't be said, but, whatever.
I mean, they're not.
It just makes me feel like it's a cat and mouse game, and I agree, Josh, we need to meet sooner than later. I see absolutely no problem with full company boards meeting, at least on our side. And the idea of a mediator, I think that's just right. It takes the pressure off everybody and can move it along in a timely fashion. There are high points, obviously. We need to know if we've got the same goals and objectives, and that would be what we're trying to figure out. I feel that's what I'm hearing here. So,
Yeah, and I guess I feel like I'm kind of for the facilitator in this, the circumstances that occurred 6 years ago when these meetings happened might have, when I'm looking at this letter and it says, however, we strongly believe a meeting includes every member of all four selectors would be counterproductive. I don't see why that would be the case, and I don't know. I guess to me there seems like there's red flags that seem to suggest a facilitator might be helpful. That our feelings about, like the feelings Laley just expressed about, the value of bringing all 5 selectmen to it, seem to be really at odds with the feelings that are represented in this letter coming from, one of the other boards. And I don't know how the other 2 towns, maybe they have different feelings that are in between or the same, wherever. So in this case, given how everybody, there seems to be general agreement we should have a meeting, but there's very different feelings, it seems, about how to approach that meeting, and so a facilitator in this case seems to be a logical thing in leveling that playing field, or
Taking the pressure off.
take the pressure off, either town's feeling like their way, they're getting it their way, or this takes all any personal stuff out of it, and you're just like, well, whatever, we'll get a facilitator and everybody just bring however much of their select board they want, and then with a facilitator we won't have to worry about it being counterproductive. Too many cooks in the kitchen or whatever. It removes that pressure from, for whatever reason, people think that, too many selectmen would be a bad thing. If you have a facilitator, that kind of removes that issue. If nobody were expressing that, then maybe your point would be more, well, we've done this before, why can't we do it now? And maybe in the future that will be the case. But yeah, it seems going into it, in the situation we have right now, that a facilitator might be, anyway, that's,
Sure.
it just seems like there's red flags, everyone's thinking different stuff and keeps the weirdness out of it. Get a facilitator, have somebody direct traffic, have a referee, no one has to be touchy.
I think that we definitely should encourage everybody who feels interested in showing up to show up to this meeting, as far as various members of various boards. If the towns only want to send a couple, if they think that would be more productive for them, that's their privilege. I think there should be no, in my opinion, should be no restriction on the towns not sending their full board if they so choose.
I fully agree with that, yeah.
And, I think facilitator might be a good idea. I might say that if we're gonna go that route, maybe we ought to encourage all 4 towns to put into a pot 3-4 questions or whatever for the facilitator to run with to get everybody's opinion on. I mean, a certain amount may come from sitting across the table. Maybe if all 4 towns put in their 3 top questions from what they and their chair and board seems to think would be important, maybe that would be interesting information
Streamline.
for everybody to share and talk about, because our top 3 priorities may not be the same, and if they aren't, maybe that's where some of this dissension is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And it all should be done by next week,
Yeah.
because unfortunately, as I think it was said there, we're going to have new members in 2 weeks.
New members, new town manager,
Mm-hmm.
one of our partner towns. Yeah.
And that's a concern.
And we won't have an EMS service
Yeah.
that has a contract.
Yeah. So what does the board want to do? Does the board want to make a motion to reiterate our initial invitation? Do we wish to amend it in any way?
I would be all in favor of waiting till after the elections and the new people, except for the fact that we don't have a contract. I mean,
Well-
we have a verbal agreement, I believe, that they're not gonna leave us in a lurch, but.
Technically speaking, we have 2 weeks post, give or take, post town meeting. Plus pending notification, whatever grace period is allowed in our contract. But as soon as possible would be preferable.
David, I have a question for you. So since our last meeting, have you, have the town managers and town administrators has there been a dialogue about the contract?
Yes, we actually met this afternoon to
Okay.
discuss it.
Okay.
And collectively, I think we all know where each community stands in terms of the short-term provision of EMS. And as soon as this, well, maybe not as soon, but shortly after this conversation concludes, Rockport is having a similar conversation at their selectmen's meeting tonight. And Camden had theirs last week. And I think Hope Select Board is also meeting tonight. I think we should have some, in the short term, relatively collective position to try to go back and talk to our current service provider about July 1. And then the other issue about the joint meeting, I think, is just a matter now of trying to coordinate schedules.
So, just to clarify, Camden had this document last week?
Yep.
Nice.
I think there was a more of an urgency regarding that document or the draft contract from Camden, the last draft, versus that was more specific terms in the contract. I think that would personally, I think that was perhaps a little premature to say until you know what you're trying to accomplish, you can leave the details to your hired help to hammer out and get a legal contract and then bring it back to the boards for approval and signature. But that's the difference between me and Lincolnville and what somebody in Camden's doing versus what somebody in Hope's doing. So, because there's no way, at our meeting we had on the 16th when you got handed that contract to Rockport, there's no way I would have suggested anybody approve that night, you know, change the name to Lincolnville. It just wasn't ready.
Sure. So given that I'm not hearing that the board's position has changed, I guess your directive remains the same with the offer of a facilitator to participate in the meeting. Do you want a motion from us, David?
As far as scheduling the meeting, no, because I think what you already done is
Yeah.
more than sufficient. In terms of facilitator, as long as I get, if I see 4 of you doing this and one kind of not saying, or thinking the motion's necessary, we ought to pursue that further in terms of who and cost and that type of discussion. And then we'll just do it.
I mean, maybe David should, maybe we should just throw that out as a just a suggestion. Like if you guys are worried about, too many people, like we would like, maybe to word it, like we understand your request for only having 2 people from each select board as a means of like streamlining the process. But we feel like every town should be able to decide for themselves how many of their board members show up. And but in order to address your concerns, what do you think about hiring a facilitator? Do the 4 towns want to do that? We don't have to, but we would
Just make it more productive.
yeah, like not like a I don't know, formal request, but like
Was that a motion?
is that a motion? That's a motion. That's a motion.
Would
Yeah,
anyone
what
care?
I just said. That's a
Would
motion.
anyone care to second that?
That's an interesting motion.
The offering of a facilitator. I'll second it.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to reword this so that,
That's okay. Discussion concerning that.
I was just gonna say, yeah, we'll request, we will, consider a meeting that includes, instead of a maximum, a minimum of 2 representatives each select board to include a facilitator for the meeting. I'm not trying to,
Sure.
trying to change what you've got, but that covers what other towns wanna do, and they bring what they want.
I don't know. I worry about it's language is important here, and I don't want to. I feel like if we say, well, we're requesting a minimum, it's kind of you go. I mean, in the interest of eliminating that whole cat and mouse thing, why don't we just say
Well, inviting the boards.
inviting the boards or respecting each board's
Autonomy and
autonomy to decide who
Yeah, okay.
who comes.
Yep.
But with respect to your concerns for too many
Efficiency.
cooks in the kitchen, efficiency, which seemed to be expressed in your letter, we're asking if you would like if we could
Providing a
provide a
facilitator.
facilitator, which the cost of which the 4 towns would split in the interest of streamlining the process.
So forget what I said.
That motion. What's
So-
that? That's the It's on record.
Wow.
You can,
David's giving me the hairy eyeball.
Well,
You want to clean that one up, John?
we can work the motion. I guess my concern is if we're gonna host a meeting, invite a meeting, we might willingly accept donations towards a facilitator, but not to. If we say split, there may be some that just say, "Oh, the hell with it, we don't need one," And if it's productive, if it's worth your while, it's worth your while.
Well, I mean,
That's me.
okay.
and an extended discussion, and not to speak for the board, but I feel like in a show of goodwill and assuming that we feel like we can afford to hire a facilitator, I wouldn't necessarily expect the invitees to incur the cost. However, donations would be gladly accepted.
Okay.
Yep, that's good.
And just within this discussion, I feel like in all of these backing and forthings and the import of the conversation, that having motions and having these things on record is very important for us all to be able to refer back to in the course of this conversation moving forward. So I appreciate participation in this. So if there is no further discussion on that particular seconded motion, all those in favor? Thank you very much. So we wait.
All right. Cross that one
Well,
off.
we won't wait till much past tomorrow morning.
Well, it does seem like everyone wants to meet. I
Yeah.
think they'll, I can see what Camden's saying, but I think that they'll probably, you know, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask, hey, look, okay, it's great, let's respect everybody's board's decision to bring whoever they want, and then,
Sure.
that should be fine.
But, also, without digressing too much further, keeping our eyes on the prize of the primary goal of identifying what our goals and priorities are for emergency medical services, and then getting to the secondary and tertiary issues that may or may not be at hand.
Yeah.
But let's cross the first bridge first.
In the meantime, make sure you, in your own mind, know what your goals and objectives are, so when we get to have the meeting,
Yeah.
you can articulate those.
Okay. Anything else there, David? Is there anything else that we need to?
Who generates the 3 questions for the facilitator? That you, Dave?
I think we could individually contribute,
All right.
because each one of your individual voices I value greatly,
All right.
as elected by the voters of Lincolnville. Not to beat that dead horse too
That's-
greatly.
Okay.
Okay, moving along. Prior to acting on the next agenda item, we need to suspend our meeting as the Board of Selectmen and convene as assessors. Can I have a motion, please?
I move that we suspend our meeting as a Board of Selectmen and convene as a Board of Assessors. Sorry, Karen.
Moved,
I'll second that.
seconded, any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. David?
So there's been a piece of property that's been transferred to a neighbor. Property that was transferred was in the farmland program. When it gets transferred, it has to come out of the farmland program. And the assessor's agent calculated the withdrawal penalty commitment at a whopping $87.18. The people withdrawing are aware of that, but you need to commit that tax.
Okay, can we have a motion, please?
Get the right line here before I read the wrong one, okay. I move the board approve and sign the farmland withdrawal penalty commitment in the amount of $87.18 for the property located at 716 High Street.
So moved?
Second.
Seconded, any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And now that we have dispatched that particular item, we need to adjourn as Board of Assessors and reconvene as Selectmen.
Move that we adjourn our meeting as Board of Assessors and reconvene as the Board of Selectmen.
Moved
Second.
and seconded, any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And now with the theme of the evening, we have 2 applications for the position of Emergency Management Director. How do we wish to proceed?
Do you want me to talk on this one too?
Yeah.
Talk to y'all to that.
Do it.
We've had a vacancy since Chief Gibbons resigned. We had a rolling application, basically apply, and we didn't have any particular deadline until the position's been filled. We actually now have 2 people that have expressed an interest in that position, and they don't seem to be beating the door down, so I guess we gotta,
Consider them.
well, we're considering them along in case they happen to be watching or tuning in,
Yes.
but, yeah.
Who will our representative from the board be?
I would be happy to volunteer.
Looking,
I don't feel qualified to interview somebody like that. I don't know. I'm just saying.
That's awesome.
I'm just saying. This is an interesting part of the selectmen's. I mean, you've
I've
some
been-
training in this regard.
Yeah.
I don't-
I've also been through how many?
I'm just being
Directors.
honest. Emergency management director.
At least 3. But anyway,
So you, yeah. Okay.
I will volunteer to participate with the town administrator if the board cares to make a motion.
Well, that leads me to this. I move that Lately Dunn, Chair of the Board of Selectmen, along with Town Administrator David Kinney, be delegated the responsibility of reviewing the EMA Director applications, interviewing prospective candidates, and making a recommendation to the full board at a future meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And we have had a few brief discussions in the past regarding current and upcoming conversations regarding the dams that we have had a relationship with. David, would you care to chat a little bit more?
sure, back when, if you recall, during budget discussions, we had a presentation from Dave Bolstridge, who was the dam agent, for the dams owned by the town of Camden on the McGonagall River and at the outlet to McGonagall Lake. The board had budgeted for continued participation in the upkeep and maintenance costs of that. However, in light of the magnitude of the change, the board wanted to have some additional issues identified that we might wish to have a conversation with the folks from Camden on. The best list I could put together with some help in trying to summarize some of the past questions and concerns is in your packet. I have not communicated that with Camden. Also included in your packet the current policy that was adopted in 1999 by the Lincolnville Board of Selectmen, which in light of some of these other issues may need to be updated or reconsidered. And the policy on the operation guidelines for the east and west dam, well, actually it goes beyond the east and west dams, but the policy adopted by the town of Camden Selectmen regarding the operations of the dams on the McGonagall Lake and the river. Just to give you a give you a sample of some of the things that have been done and adopted. Again, the ownership is with the town of Camden, so we participate in the dam committee dam committee discussions. We being a couple representatives from Lincolnville on the committee. That committee is advisory in the nature to the Camden Selectmen. The Camden Board of Selectmen actually, or Camden Select Board, sorry, is advisory to Camden Select Board. They in turn set policy, go to town meeting, their town meeting for approval of what actually gets done in terms of finances. So. And I also included a article that was out recently regarding the Montgomery Dam, which we don't have any participation in that discussion. Montgomery Dam is the one that's located directly behind the Smiling Cow. But it does give you some idea of some of the conversations going on in Camden about that dam and about the others on the river. And there are both publicly owned dams and privately owned dams on that river, so there's a lot of moving parts again.
I have a question. When were the east and west dams built? Are these like 150 years old?
Yeah, they are, I don't know, somewhere I could find probably in the notebook, committee notebook, when they were constructed. My understanding is they were owned by the mills in Camden, and they used the water to power the mill.
Right, okay.
And they used to have wild fluctuations, you know, mill needed power, open the gate, and took the water. And then the ownership got transferred either to Knox County Fish and Game or McGonagall Watershed Association, or both, maybe somewhere along. And then ultimately, you know, there's duties and responsibilities to ownership. And the dams were offered to the town of Camden, because they're all in Camden. And Camden already had the Montgomery Dam. They took ownership of the east and west dams. Along with that came some monies donated to the town of Camden for their upkeep and repair. And then Camden also acquired, not too long ago, the Seabright Dam, which Joe Sawyer owned, that was generating electricity for a period of time, and then it no longer generates electricity. Some of the equipment was no longer functional, and the cost to put it back was more than they'd ever generate in electricity, so they just stopped.
So just to elaborate on everything that David said, I requested that this be a conversation that the board have in consideration of the significant request for monies for the current plan projects, and reviewing these historic agreements that previous board had made for the town of Lincolnville, and considering a number of other agreements that the town made with regards to various parcels. And I thought, you know, it's a 20-year-old agreement, and we are now looking at a significant and potentially consistent financial commitment on our and all of our constituent and our behalf. And so I thought it wise for us as a board to have a discussion, and David and I had a chat about some of the potential points that the town of Lincolnville, considering the, maybe casual is too strong of a word, but essentially casual agreement that we have that commits us to a third. And the fact that we are not really included in any of the decision processes that commit us to a certain financial commitment. And perhaps it's the current political climate, but I feel that our first duties are to protect the interests of our constituents. And so without some of these questions being addressed and called out in some sort of agreement, I don't feel that the town can responsibly allocate any sort of funds to any other project in any other municipality.
When's the last time we got a dispatch from our members on the advisory committee? Because I've never heard from them.
We have occasionally had
Been
non-agenda items.
It's been quite a while. I'm not sure during the time of the previous Camden town manager that the committee even met.
Wow.
Yeah,
If they did, it was once. I mean, it was, we ended up, when they had, before the current town manager was there, when the interim was there, some of you may recall, we got 4 years worth of billing on the work that had been done. in one fell swoop, which we paid our share. But
So I feel that I would like for, we have 2 members on that advisory committee, is that right?
I think we have 3.
Okay.
But
I would love to have them come before us and us to have a conversation with them, so we can just glean as much knowledge. I mean, they're the experts on this from Lincolnville compared to us, so I would love to have a conversation with them before we move forward with this agenda item, just so we're all better informed as to what's been going on.
How does that negate any of the greater financial implications, or our agreement doesn't call out them being involved in any of this? It's either the Camden Town Manager or the Camden Select Board budgeting and making decisions and interviewing and hiring contractors and all of the everything.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it would be good for us to have as much background information as possible. I understand that the Camden Board of Selectmen does not need to follow anything the advisory committee says, and this stuff is not necessarily.
Why would we concurrently not want to get some answers from them with regards to these questions?
I just don't see the harm in waiting, so we are fully informed on what our members on the advisory committee have been.
I mean, we're currently on the block right now for $270,000, correct? For future
According to the casual
agreement.
that we signed.
Yeah.
well, the
Wow.
Camden voters haven't approved a project yet that I'm aware of.
But currently called out in their budget is Lincolnville will provide X number of dollars.
Their current plan, as I understand it, is to borrow money from themselves with they call it interfund borrowing to finance construction projects at the east and or west dam and pay themselves back over time with their money
And some of our money.
and appropriations from us, correct?
I mean, I hear you, Josh. I think talking to our advisory members would be an interesting conversation. However, taking it back to what our job description is, I don't think that it is out of bounds at all to say, hey, we are potentially on the hook for a lot of money. I mean, $270,000 is more than we allocate for multiple departments in our own budget. So I don't think that it is out of the question to say, hey, where are our taxpayers being considered in your decision-making paradigm?
Absolutely, and I think we should definitely do this.
But why wait? What's the virtue in waiting?
Well, dams is something I would say most of us don't have a whole lot of knowledge and experience on, compared to people that are serving on the committee representing us. I guess I just wish we had a conversation with them earlier, so I feel more knowledgeable before we go in and have this conversation with Camden. Does that make sense?
I'm not talking about dams, I'm talking about finances, I'm talking about money.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
sure,
we could get that background, like, that would be interesting to know, is about, right,
there's any number of things that I am sure you're not an expert on when it comes to running a municipality. However, you have been tasked with being a steward of the tax dollars that we are entrusted with managing. And what I'm talking about is the management tools with which we apply any other sort of decision-making processes. Whatever the widget is, whether it's dams, ambulances, fire trucks, trash, you name it. So I don't see the value in impeding our assertion of asking for a certain level of accountability and assurances from a town that is requesting a significant amount of money. I feel it would be irresponsible for us to continue in the way that we have, which has been very casual. It's one thing when we get an annual request for $3,000. That's something that on an annual basis we can have a conversation about. But when we get, I mean, we've pulled out a multiple town meeting to completely revamp the entire agreement when we were looking at what was the Camden first aid increase? It was $70,000. It went from, I'm just, thinking the relative increase and what that triggered. And I'm thinking I think it would be negligent of us to not review the parameters upon which we convey money to another town.
I agree with everything that you just said. And what I'm saying is it feels almost disrespectful to the members of our dam advisory committee to not even have a conversation with them before we jump forward in a, probably it's going to be a rather contentious conversation with Camden that needs to happen. But I feel like it's the right thing to do to bring in our members from Lincolnville. I'm saying a delay of 2 weeks. I don't really see that being that big a deal. And I feel like we'll be better informed, even though it's not, financials in the dam, and the background of the management of the dam, it is all connected. And I want to do everything that's laid out here and ask all these questions of Camden, absolutely. But I don't see the harm in waiting 2 weeks so we can have a conversation with our members.
It will be town meeting in 2 weeks, so you're really talking about a month, but not to split hairs.
Maybe,
I'm curious.
Not to split the baby here, but why not? Maybe similar to what you've done with Route 1 Advisory Committee at times and Recreation at times, and who knows who else at times. Maybe we ought to try to set up a board, Gunnycook Dam Committee workshop, but also in the meantime, alert those in Camden to the fact that, the policy says this, but it does require voter approval of funding both there and here. I mean, this board, if for example, and this is very far-fetched, let's say that somebody said we're going to do $100 million worth of work. I'm just using this because I can do the math. Lincolnville share is now,
Why not make it a more realistic number, $1 million?
all right, $1 million. Lincolnville share is $330,000, $333,000, policy adopted by some Lincolnville Board of Selectmen in 1999 be damned, unless the voters approve the $333,000, all bets are off. And I think it would be beneficial to alert those in a timely fashion so that they can consider that in their plans, and in the meantime we could be getting our own troops together to have a conversation.
I can muddy the waters just a little bit
Please
more
do.
for the hell of it.
Do it.
Reading in the papers recently about the work that they're planning on the Montgomery Dam and talking about putting in a fish ladder there so that your alewives can come up and play with that. All well and good. Alewives need fresh water and need a lake. I don't believe that the river would sustain them, so that means somebody, and there are monies coming from other sources maybe for this, but the bottom line's gonna be, they're gonna need to get through either the east or west dam somewhere to get into the lake. And that means money's gonna have to come, and this isn't in here anywhere, I'm reading in from what I've read elsewhere, but this is other monies that are gonna have to be expended going in. I think it would be to our advantage if we could have a conversation with Camden Select Board and see if we could have a member, gonna shoot me because I'm gonna get elected for doing it. A member of the Select Board be, and if for nothing else, maybe even an unofficial member, a non-voting member of their budgetary dam meetings, so that we see firsthand what's going on for money and what's happening, and can be brought back to this board so that we have a clue what's going on and why it might be going on. And this probably isn't gonna happen right this year or next year, but it's probably gonna happen. And it is gonna definitely impact us, plus all the repairs and everything else you're saying. I mean, who knows those dams were built a long time ago.
Mhm.
And I understand is they've got erosion on the edges and stuff like that, which the dam itself may be fine, but what's holding it in place may not be. And that probably is gonna be pricey to fix.
Yep.
Um,
I think you bring up some excellent points and a really fantastic suggestion, David. And again, reading in the newspapers, because it's so fun to read about things in the newspapers, but you know, a number of these questions which are called out, which I would love to ask of the town of Camden, you know, there's a number of is the town of Lincolnville being considered to a 30% degree with the larger implications of some of these proposals? And understanding that a year ago there was a dam study kickoff meeting where these conversations got started. How and where were we included in the larger implications of these conversations? And in the larger study that is apparently happening with regards to at least the town of Camden being in a position to receive funding, is the town of Lincolnville also being included? I feel like there are real-time current conversations that could have implications on Lincolnville as we are currently called out for the 30% participation. So I think you raise a very good point. However, we couldn't get the answer to that question without formally asking Camden where we stand with regards to some of these, and looking at reviewing our current agreement.
and just out of adding fuel to the fire, David, about what percentage of McGonagall Lake is in Lincolnville, do you know? Water-wise, do you have a clue?
Probably 2/3 of it,
2/3 of it?
the shore frontage.
So in other words, so our two-thirds of the tax base of this body of water will go up and down on their whim, which we have no control over.
Which we don't. We never have.
I got a quick question then. So, just so I can understand this a little clearer, so let's say they decide, Camden votes that they want to put in $1 million worth of fish ladders, and we're on the hook then according to the way things are left as the most recent.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're on the hook for a third of that, but that has to go before the town voters, right? So.
Sure.
So then the town says, well, we don't want to pay for the fish ladders. We fixed the dam, but we don't want to pay for the fish ladders. And then what happens? We go back to Camden.
Camden doesn't have a recourse.
That's a very
as far
good
as I know.
question.
So we're not, so.
It puts us all in a pretty messy place.
Right. But I mean, the towns.
The way it has been with a minimal annual allocation has been fine and good.
Right.
But what we're talking about is a much more complicated and much more expensive proposal, and
there's currently this assumption that we're going to follow through with whatever they decide, and we want to say, well, hold on, we hold on, which in that case,
we're talking orders of magnitude.
right. So in that case, I see what you're. Fine, let's have a meeting with our the people that know the history of this, our representatives. But I mean, I don't see any reason. Right? I mean, we would. It seems like what.
Given that our voters are potentially being asked in 2 weeks, to allocate an amount of funds
Right.
for these expenditures, I'd like to have some answers.
Yeah. It seems. Yeah. Right.
So how do we envision this going down? We appoint someone to communicate to Camden, we write a letter, and then they write us a letter, and then what? It feels like, so in the history of this relationship with Camden regarding the east and west dams, we've never encountered a potential bill this large, right?
Correct.
And so to me, it feels like, again, getting back to select board's meeting, it feels like this is going to be a very important meeting that I think both both boards should be meeting and discussing.
Yeah. Probably. That I could see that.
I'm not sure when. I mean,
We need to have a discussion about it, and we need to have get a feeling of what each party's expectations and liabilities are on it. And we also need to probably have a talk with our lawyer as to, I mean, the other thing that's popping up in my head here right now is, should something happen with what's in there for an agreement with either east or west dam, how much, since we're holding 2/3 of the water of the lake when it rushes down into Camden, how much are we liable for?
Jeez. Well, I mean, what this motion is only saying is.
I know, I'm taking it too far, I realize that.
No, but I mean, what this motion is saying is the question really for us is, do we make this motion saying someone should give the heads up to Camden that
We would like to review.
we want you guys to know, just don't, before you go sending us any bills, we need to have a discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it sounds, which whether or not we meet with our historical society, it doesn't matter. We still gotta let them know, don't send us any bills unless, you know what I mean, unless we have a conversation first, because this 1999 agreement is, we view as casual and it's not binding, and besides we have to put it before our voters and all that. And in that case, I think the sooner the better. Somebody's got to give them the heads up that we don't intend to pay any $250,000 bills.
And not that we need to run out a giant laundry list of points, but some salient points that we are beholden to in our decision making to our taxpayers, that, you know, considering inclusion of and reworking of an agreement that gives consideration to how we can protect as a town our constituents' financial interests.
Yeah.
And how we can restructure that agreement that gives us a guarantee to be included in the decision-making process, if there's an expectation that we contribute financially.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And I don't feel that we should wait, because it takes a long time to get all this.
Yeah, there should be some communication, and can't be sooner than later, that we're thinking about this, and you know that.
So the do we know if in Kim's proposed budget they have an amount for all the repairs for the east and west dam, or is that going to be coming in a future?
Have they finalized their budget?
Oh, yeah, their
Yeah.
budget's been finalized for a while.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that question. My understanding is they chose some project to one of the dams.
Yeah, I'm
and
trying-
Funded
I've read the
And
whole budget,
proposed.
but I couldn't rattle it
I
off
think
to you
they've
right
got
now,
some
but there are
money set
definitely
out-
funds
I
called
think
out.
they've got some money set
Specifically
aside
coming
from
from
previous things
Lincolnville.
already for
Okay,
going
sorry.
to the dam,
Yeah.
but I
Which we don't
think
have in
they're
our
coming
budget.
out.
For those new repairs, we just have the general amount that we've been.
Right, we
Right.
budgeted an additional amount
Mhm.
with on the assumption that they were going to finance this project over a certain period of time, and our share of future payment would be this amount,
Right,
and funded partially from our reserve as well.
and I will express what I feel is, well, negligence on my part and regret that this conversation didn't come up sooner. But we're having it now. Because I feel like we should have had this conversation
Yeah.
months ago, but here we are.
Okay.
So Dave,
Did I
Or
hear
Dave
that?
Kennedy.
Did I hear that Dave wanted to volunteer for that?
I'd be more than glad to, as soon as one of you take over the Midco Solid Waste.
Oh, right, yeah.
I feel the same way.
No,
I mean,
I would just do that, yes.
Okay. Would anyone care to make a motion then, please?
I move that the board delegate the task of communicating to the town of Camden our concerns regarding the oversight and operations of the east and west dams to David Barrows and the town administrator.
So moved?
Second.
Seconded? Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank
I'll
you,
abstain.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, David,
You're
for your volunteerism.
Thank you for disguising the shotgun very well.
Okay, and in light of many of our conversations this evening, moving rapidly along to our 13th agenda item, we have town meeting, and so given the extent of our town administrator's duties leading up to voting, would the board be okay with having a warrant-only meeting? And if so, what time and when?
Is that the 10th?
Yes.
Okay, I am not available that day.
Oh, neither am I.
What?
I'm in St. Louis.
Hitting stuff.
June 8th. Tour starts. Once again, I'm not
The whole
here
week,
for
right?
the whole until July 16th or July 15th is the Monday that I'm back, which is actually literally I get back like that day,
Which is awesome.
which is I'll be coming in from
Coming in hot.
Wisconsin.
Okay, so for us three remaining
Yep.
Yes.
members that can attend,
I can do most any time. I work that day, so I'm taking off from work. Ideally for me, 5:30 would be good, but I mean, we can do whatever.
5:30
I
is-
can set my schedule.
5:30 is fine for me. I can make that work
Great.
also.
let's do that.
5:30.
Excellent.
You guys are awesome.
Need anything else from us on that, David? Nope. We have before us the treasurer's and payroll warrants to approve and sign.
I move that the board approve the treasurers and payroll warrants.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? And we have one more piece of business before us that requires us to enter into executive session. Can I have a motion?
I move that pursuant to Title I MRSA Section 4056C, that the Board of Selectmen enter into the executive session to discuss the possible disposition of real property where premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive bargaining position of the town.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Good luck.